Have you ever looked at a sentence and realized it holds a ton of power? Well, today we're diving into just one of those. It's only 13 words long, but in the world of professional valuation, getting it wrong can lead to some massive problems. So let's pull back the curtain and see what's really going on inside this one super important definition. And here it is. This is the official definition of an intended user from the International Valuation Standards. Any party identified by the clients and valuer in the scope of work as users of the valuation. Now, at first glance, that seems pretty straightforward, right? But trust me, every single word you see here is like a carefully placed brick in a much, much larger wall. And that kind of makes you wonder, why? Why does this have to be so incredibly precise? What is this definition really trying to do? Or maybe a better question is, what kind of mess is it trying to prevent? To get to the bottom of it, we've got to break it down piece by piece. So first up, let's talk about the people involved. Who actually has the power to make the call here? You've got two main players. On one side, there's the client. That's the person or company asking for the valuation. And on the other, you have the valuer, the expert who's actually doing the work. Now, here's the crucial part. Neither of them can act alone. The power to decide who this report is for, well, it's shared. It absolutely has to be a team decision. And that brings us to maybe the most important three-letter word in this whole thing. And. Client and valuer. This little word makes it crystal clear that naming an intended user is a joint agreement. The client can't just add their friends to the list, and the valuer can't slip someone in without the client's okay. Nope. It's a mandatory partnership, plain and simple. Okay, so we know who makes the decision. It's a joint effort, but where does this decision get recorded? I mean, it can't just be a handshake deal or a quick email, right? It needs to have an official, formal home. And that home is called the scope of work. You can think of this document as the official rulebook for the whole project. It's the written contract that spells everything out, all the terms, the conditions, and, you guessed it, the official list of intended users. If a name isn't in this document, then they are officially on the outside looking in. Now let's zoom in on another keyword here, identified. Notice the definition doesn't say implied or assumed. That's on purpose. Identified means it has to be a conscious, deliberate action. The users have to be specifically named, written down, and listed out. There is absolutely no room for guessing games. You're either formally identified in that scope of work or you are not an intended user, period. All right, so we've looked at the who, the where, and the how. We've taken the sentence apart. Now, let's put all those pieces back together and see the airtight process this definition actually creates. You can see it's a really clear, logical sequence. First, the client and valuer agree to work together. Then, they create that super important scope of work document. Step 3 is the key action. Inside that document, they explicitly identify who gets to rely on the report. And all of this leads to the final, rock-solid conclusion: only the people named in that document are considered intended users, no one else. We've covered the what and the how, but that leads us to the biggest question of all. Why? Why go through all this trouble for just one definition? Well, it all comes down to creating a really, really important protective barrier. Just think for a second what could happen if this rule didn't exist. Let's say a valuer does a report for a bank that's giving out a loan. Some random third-party investor gets a copy, makes a bad decision based on it, and loses a bunch of money. Without this definition, they might try to sue the valuer, even though the report was never made for them. This rule stops that. It makes identifying users a deliberate act. It demands it be put in writing, and it draws a very clear line in the sand. This protects everybody. It protects the client from weird, unintended uses of their report, and it protects the valuer from liability from people they've never even heard of. So let's look at the sentence one last time. Any party identified by the client and valuer in the scope of work as users of the valuation. It feels a little different now, doesn't it? It's not just a bunch of professional jargon anymore. You can actually see the whole system of checks and balances, the clear process, and the protective walls that are built into these 13 simple words. And that leaves us with one final, pretty important thought. We've spent all this time talking about who is on the inside of this definition, but what about everyone else? If you're not an intended user, what are the real risks you're taking if you decide to rely on a valuation report that was never, ever meant for you?